Great Wednesday. Welcome to the Healing American Narratives podcast. I'm your host, King. I'm joined by my co-host, Reggie. How you doing today, Reggie?
Doing well, King. Always good to be with you here. I can remember how to speak. On a Wednesday morning, and I'm just dealing with a little bit of a camera issue, so you can see the vast expanse of my office space as opposed to a better close-up. But other than that, my spiritual energy is out of 10, and I'm looking forward to jumping in here with you.
Well, equal. I'm a 10 this morning like you and having my challenges because I'm not in my normal location. And so, again, having getting used to that and, get the camera lighting and everything. But I believe we can get through that despite our technical challenges this morning. So what you grateful for this morning?
As always, have a refrigerator filled with food. Not completely filled, but filled enough. I have indoor plumbing. I have safe drinking water. I have access to more food and transportation to get it when I need it. And I have a roof over my head. And I get up every morning and get to do work that I care about. That said, I have people in my life whom I love. And as far as I can tell, they also love me, friends and family. And my body and mind, again, as far as I can tell, seem to be in decent working order. So I'm grateful for all of that, the very basic gratitudes, but for me, they're the essentials. And compared and contrasted with, I would say, over 90% of the people on the planet, I'm very fortunate.
Absolutely. I concur with you that I'm very fortunate as well. I'm grateful for my life, my health, my ability to see, hear, walk, talk, stand, breathe, and have sound mind. I'm grateful for that 24 hours to pursue my purpose. I'm grateful to be able to be in another country and still be able to join our show and still have the technology that make that possible. I'm grateful for the experience I've had over the last 7 days, just tapping into my spiritual, emotional energy. This place is incredible, and been able to kind of deal with a lot of issues here. So it's just really been a magical transformation retreat. I'm grateful for the experience. Then finally, I'm grateful for the infinite possibilities that today is going to provide. So why don't you walk us into our topic for today?
Yeah, so as we say, we've been at this now for over 3 years together. It was 3 years in June. We've been discussing Healing America's Narratives, which was the title of my 2022 book. And the subtitle is The Feminine, the Masculine, and Our Collective National Shadow. And speaking specifically about the collective national shadow of the United States. Since the book came out, things got a little bit better in the United States. And then in the last almost 8.5 months now, they're getting increasingly worse, as bad as they've been in my lifetime. And so we want to shine a light to the extent we can on that shadow, that part of a nation which tens of millions of people make believe isn't true, try to deny, or it just has never entered into their consciousness. So briefly, just to bring everybody up to speed, the 9 traits of America's shadow that are easy to prove are the following. I'm not saying these are the only 9, but these are the 9 that if you look at the last 250 plus years, and if you're an honest person operating in good faith, these are glaring if you do some shadow work. So those 9 traits are ignorance, arrogance, fear, bigotry, violence, greed, excess, bullying, and untrustworthiness. The argument I made in the book, and which I believe now more than ever, is that Donald Trump embodies all 9 of those traits. So he's like a walking exemplar for the worst of America. And because of the loyalty tests that those who are now in his administration have had to go through, loyalty to him, not to the U.S. Constitution, I would argue that the majority of the people in leadership positions in his administration, especially, but not only J.D. Vance, Russell Vought, Pete Hegseth, Stephen Miller, who could be the most dangerous of the crew, Pam Bondi, and others also embody these 9 traits in various degrees and in different ways. So I'm not saying that these people all look at the country and the world the same way. In fact, Trump really doesn't. Trump is basically a tool for the white nationalist movement as it was shared with him through Project 2025, which Russell Vogt and Stephen Miller are strong proponents of. But we're faced now with a country that's barely operating in a democratic infrastructure anymore, through a democratic infrastructure. The only thing that's keeping it kind of close to democratic is some federal judges are pushing back on the autocratic moves being made by the administration. And because we know the Supreme Court have supported Trump in many of his endeavors in the past, it's going to be interesting to see what happens when some of these cases that are being upheld at the federal and the federal appeals levels, what happens if and when they get to the Supreme Court. If the Supreme Court upholds the current movement of the Russell Vogt attempt to destroy the bureaucracy and the Stephen Miller-led attempt to rid the country of immigrants and return power to a wealthy white Christian male population, which J.D. Vance is also in favor of, effectively this will not be a democracy anymore. For the most part, it's not, but the courts are keeping it close. But once if the courts fail, we will no longer have a democracy in the United States. And it's the speed with which this fall has taken place is unlike anything that has been seen, whether you go to Asia, Eastern Europe, or Central Europe, in formerly democratic states. I mean, totalitarian regimes have swept through and taken over other totalitarian regimes or autocratic states, but a fall from democracy has not taken place this quickly. So, two things I want to put a spotlight on today are Stephen Miller's language and what he has said in the last 2 weeks or so, and also Pam Bondi's performance. She is the Attorney General of the United States, and her refusal to cooperate with the United States Senate in terms of her Justice Department refusing to provide documents that the Senate, which typically oversees in terms of checks and balances, the administrative or executive branch, her refusal, she just basically says, I'm not going to answer that question. She said that numerous times. She said, I'm not going to give that information. And she began to insult the senators personally, calling them failed lawyers, mocking them, saying she's not going to say anything to them unless they apologize to Donald Trump first. I mean, it's actually frightening to watch this happen in real time. I'll say one more quick bit about Stephen Miller. If anybody has not listened to, or preferably listened to and watched his rant, I don't like to characterize people speaking, but I'm going to call it a rant, his basic white European Christian rant at the funeral, the public memorial service, I should say, for the right-wing activist who was shot dead at a Utah college a couple of weeks ago now. Stephen Miller's language there was right out of the Third Reich. This is frightening language in terms of who really is an American citizen, who should be an American citizen, and taking the country back for these rightful American citizens. So that's the place I want to land today. Some people from whom I learn argue that the democracy has already failed, and we're scraping now to try to get parts of it back. So I'm not an expert on government and the Constitution, so I respect that view. And so I'm not sure if it has already failed and we're grappling to get it back, or if we're just close to it failing. But we're in one of those two scenarios for sure.
Well, again, I want to give you gratitude for choosing such a timely and necessary topic for us to discuss. I would say I'm a little more pessimistic than you are. I believe it's already failed. We're struggling to get it back.
Mhm.
I say that mainly because what I'm seeing, I didn't know this was going to happen, but I'm not surprised it's happening. And what I am surprised is that, I guess, people's reaction to it happening. Because when Donald Trump began to choose his loyalists as his cabinet members, and then they had the nerve to be testifying before testifying before Congress, and they're able to say whatever it takes to just get appointed. Like, they have no interest in upholding the truth of what they said. I mean, it was asked of each of them point blankly, would they be more loyal to the Constitution of the United States, or would they be loyal to Donald Trump in certain situations? And they all chose they would be loyal to the Constitution, and they wouldn't show favoritism with Donald Trump because they uphold the Constitution. And we see clearly that they have no interest in doing that. It's like that's not even a consideration in their thinking process. Pam Bundy is just going to do exactly what Donald Trump tells her to do. Cash Patel, of course, Stephen Miller has his own agenda, which Trump gives him grace to do it, mainly because it keeps Trump in power. And so as long as it keeps Trump in power, and to your point about whether Trump is believing in the white nationalists or not, he knows that's his power, that's his base. And that's where he needs to make sure that he empowers that particular wing, because that's who's going to protect him if the rest comes at him. So that's why he's going to continue to keep feeding that radical left, demonizing the left, so that that particular white Christian nationalist already believes that, and so that just riles him up, and he's their spokesman. And so they can create more. The atmosphere and the environment creates more Charlie Kirks to be embodied and voted even more now, to say their racist rants, perspectives, and then put that under free speech. Then anything that's contrary to that, then that's considered to be not protected under free speech. So they're blatantly, it's free speech as long as you watch what you say and you agree with us, and you got free speech. And I just saw an article yesterday about, I forgot what city in North Carolina, they're looking at giving blacks in that particular area reparations, so that the local state is actually examining that. And Donald Trump has found out about it, and Pam Bondi has stepped in and say that she's going to make sure that she sues North Carolina and tries to block that if it happens. Again, the Republicans have always ran on states' rights, not having oversight by the government, and that's all Donald Trump does. So that's a part to me that's not surprising that they're doing that. Like I said, it's surprising to me that people are surprised by that, because Donald Trump's agenda is really clear. That's what I'm saying. It's like they get more emboldened. So I guess by the end of the year, definitely before the end of his term, I think they would just really come out and say white Christian nationalists, because they see there's no consequences. And Pam Bundy believes there's no consequences. Cash Patel believes there's no consequences. They believe that they've taken power. Donald Trump is a complete complete authority. Supreme Court has embodied him and told him that he has the right to do it. So worst case scenario, if they lose power, Democrats take them to trial, then Supreme Court's going to not charge Donald Trump with anything. And I'm sure that Donald Trump is going to make sure that they are pardoned. And that's, when he pardoned the January 6th rioters, then that confirmed to them that there's no crime that they're going to be convicted of. I mean, so now they can do what they want with reckless abandonment and with no worry about the consequences other than their own souls. And they don't care about they don't believe in that they're going to be punished in the afterlife, or that karma is going to come for them. So that would be the only retribution. Now, the courts, I agree that the courts are our last fingertips on the cliff, so to speak, before they fall over, before you can totally over the cliff. But when the largest court in the land is siding with them, it's only a matter of time, before the courts are not as effective because they're going to get overruled by the Supreme Court. So now I know that's not for every case, but yet and still on the primary key cases, like again, birthright citizenship is coming back up, and Trump wants to move that fast through the docket. He wants so even though that's already been kind of ruled on, and we thought it was over, it's not. They're going to just repackage it, reframe it, and make it palatable to the point where his 6 conservative judges on the Supreme Court are willing to go ahead and change the Constitution before, so that because even just I saw an article the other day that Clarence Thomas spoke at a function, and he said that we are really going to begin to reinterpret the Constitution. That's what's going to be our goal. We're not going to rely anymore as much on precedents. We're going to look at our own interpretation going forward as what we believe the forefathers meant, as opposed to judging by precedents in history. So right there, he's letting you know that they have a whole different agenda as far as how they're going to vote on previous constitutional cases. All they got to do is be brought up by the Trump's administration, and then they're going to be voted, and the majority is going to rule. So again, I think we're going to fall more before things shift. It's going to definitely get worse because I think people just need to wake up. I think most people still believe that it's not happening. It's not going to happen. They count on the midterms to change things, and they think that's going to kind of hopefully righten the ship. And my closing piece is I don't think that's going to righten the ship because I'm not seeing strength in a plan from the Democrats. I don't see a vision of what they're going to do differently, of where they're taking the country. And that's what it's going to take to get people really engaged and connected and believing again in our political system. And right now, they're not. The leadership is not. Their best they're trying to do is just, again, position themselves as not being as evil as Donald Trump, and we need to stop him. But, again, with the exception of Bernie Sanders, Jamie Raskin, Elizabeth Warren, Costas Cortez, AOC, and Jasmine Crockett. That's all I really see that's really pushing forth with any backbone and willing to stand up. So, but they don't have enough power with themselves to really bring about change. So that's the unfortunate part. So, and I know that Chuck Schumer's going to cave. I guarantee he caves before the end of the week. He's going to find him and Hakeem Jeffries are going to compromise to the things they're holding for, which is they're fighting for Medicare for all to get back that payment for those benefits. And I guarantee they're going to compromise, and it's not going to be what they're standing on right now. So that's what I believe.
I hope you're wrong about Schumer and Jeffries. I mean, I'm not crazy about either one of them, but I hope that doesn't happen. But a couple of things you pointed to. I mean, I want to start with the Clarence Thomas thing. So what he's talking about there is a legal position known as originalism, and it actually was introduced decades ago by Robert Bork, who almost made it to the Supreme Court but didn't quite make it there. And it was a mantle. Antonin Scalia is the one who really brought the idea of originalism into the Supreme Court. And basically he was saying that we're not reinterpreting the Constitution because that becomes problematic, but we're going back to the way the founders intended it. So we're not putting anything new there. We're going back to the original meaning of it, as though they know, like this small group of people knows exactly what the language meant to the founders when they wrote it back in the 1700s. Now, I know enough about literary interpretation that you say that in a literary class that you know exactly what somebody who was living 250 years ago meant when they wrote those words in the context they meant, you'll get laughed at. Now, you can provide evidence for what you think and put forth your opinion, but to say this is what the founders meant, I mean, that's laughable for most legal scholars. But you're exactly right. That's what they're trying to do. So that's one. A second thing is that this woman who was, I forget her name. It begins with an I. I'm not going to look it up right now. But the judge who has pushed back against sending the federal troops into Chicago and into Portland, whether they're Texas troops or whether they're California troops or whatever troops. I mean, she basically said, all of the reasons for sending these troops in are made up, and you can't send those federal troops into these cities. So, the Trump administration is pushing back against that, but she ruled on it, and she's a Trump appointee. Like, she's actually looking at the facts, looking at the law, and saying, you can't do that. Governor Pritzker is right. Governor Newsom is right. Those federal troops don't belong on the streets, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that's, speaking of the National Guard now, the ICE is a different issue because ICE has the ability to go into any quote unquote border state. And that includes the border of Canada and any ocean. So that's why they can get into a lot of these other areas. So that's one. There's some pushback there. With regard to Pete Hegseth, who has now blown up 4 Venezuelan boats, killing at least 17 people that we know of, providing no evidence that, in fact, they were running drugs. The New York State Bar Association, as a body, basically came out and said those are acts of extra legal. They're murder. They're government murder. They weren't approved military strikes. There was no evidence this was any kind of enemy of the United States. And even after the fact, there's been no evidence. So the courts are continuing, again, to push back. The Brennan Center for Justice has over 100 lawsuits against the Trump administration right now. Mark Elias, and I forget his group, is called Democracy Docket, I think, is doing the same. He has at least 50 cases going on. The American Civil Liberties Union is American ACLU, is going on. So there's a lot of legal stuff going on, but there's so much to push back on. It's overwhelming. Now, there's so much to push back on is really important here, because I want to go back to retired and now deceased Supreme Court Justice David Souter. And you've heard me say this. You're probably tired of hearing me say this. But back in 2012, in a conversation at the law school at the University of New Hampshire, he said the thing that keeps him up at night is not an attack from a foreign country. It's not another terrorist attack. It's not blah, 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 blah. It's the civic ignorance of the United States population. That people in the United States don't know enough about the country. And so they just don't pay attention to it. They enjoy, not everybody has the same freedoms, but generally speaking, we drive on paved roads. We have more or less safe drinking water. Nowadays, we can vote. It's harder for some people than for others. We can go out and get a job. So there's all problems, but we live in a relatively free society. But as it's being taken away from us, we have our heads, I don't know if we're in the ground or up our asses, but we're not paying attention. We don't recognize what's happening, and the democracy is falling around us. And here's the interesting piece. And this is the piece you mentioned, Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and some others, because they're going out and speaking to mainly white people in Republican states and cities. And they're filling arenas and rooms and everything else. And here's what's really interesting. If you read Project 2025 and the administrative state that they're trying to destroy, and they already have destroyed big chunks of it, the services that those administrative states provide, and you can go, begin with Medicaid, go to Medicare, go to Social Security, disability benefits, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it's not only those things, but those are some of them. People of color, I just generally say people who are Black or brown, to overly generalize African Americans and Latinos, they are disproportionately represented in the populations that are hurt by the destruction of the administrative state, right? Percentage-wise. But the majority of the people who are being hurt in terms of actual numbers, not percentages, by what the Trump administration is doing are poor white people. So again, the people of color are disproportionately represented in those populations. But in terms of actual numbers, poor white people are getting hammered by this. And they're only beginning to see that now. Many of them voted for Donald Trump twice. And they're only beginning to see the impact of what his administration is doing now because it's affecting them. And that goes back to the final thing I'll say, and that's the other thing that I hammer away at is developmental worldview. Oh, I don't care about any of this unless it directly affects me or my family. Oh, it's affecting me now. Now I care about it. That's a problem. Those of us, and I'm going to say us, who care about all human beings, and by default, that means all Americans, regardless of color, gender, skin pigmentation, blah, 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 blah. When any one of us is hurt, we get concerned. And that's the move that we need. And you can't just suddenly make it happen. Development takes time to really change how I see the world. So all of this is interrelated. And the speed with which David Souter's civic ignorance begins to get remedied, the increasingly informed populace, oh, these people are doing that to us when they take away this administrative office or fire these federal officers. That's what they're doing. Now I'm against it. But if you look at the history of Eastern and Central Europe in the middle of the 20th century, it took the people too long, and include Russia in that, Soviet Union. It took the people too long to realize what was going on. And that was a whole different regime because they were just removing people and killing them. I mean, 14 million people between Stalin and Hitler died. So, they're not killing us yet. But if you listen to Stephen Miller, I'm not comfortable that won't begin to happen. That's a little bit alarmist, I admit that. But I'm also down, at the bottom of the list of people being targeted. Even though I'm relatively poor financially, I have, I'm a second generation Italian American, and people think of me as being white, but I'm also outspoken. But we have to wake each other up. So I'll put a pin in it there.
Well, I think it comes back to the last statement you made. I think it comes back to, again, regardless of where people stand politically, it's going to come down to what do you identify as. If you identify as white, then you're going to see, some degrees that may bother your conscience about what the United States is doing, current mega administration is doing, but you're not going to talk too badly or oppose too loudly because it's not affecting you. And so that's why identity to me is so key and critical. And we get caught up in this whole race construct that people believe that there's truly a difference between us as human beings based on the color of our skin, based on the ethnic group we're in, based on our gender and all those things. That we're not all quantum, that we're all energy, and that we're all connected, whether we want to accept it or not, we are. And to let people with agendas tell us that literally the moon is black and that it's raining every single day when it's not, even though we can clearly see with our eyes what we see, and we choose to believe that because it fits our best interest. So that's why, again, Killing America's Narratives, out of the podcast, these false narratives that people believe in. Again, you got a little more hope. I don't, just because from what I've seen through the country, what the country's tolerated for years. I mean, I was talking to someone here recently, and then they, from their perspective, again, this is a person outside of the political discussion, we've seen a line in everything else, possibly, as far as love, as far as consciousness. But then when it comes down to, they still can see some understanding in their minds about how the administration, because it may protect Israel, so they're willing to give grace to some of the other things they're doing.
Yeah.
And that's what shocks me. So, because my point is, anybody who still supports, and they didn't understand my perspective when I say that anybody who supports MAGA is wrong. And their pushback to me is no, they can still see, because again, they got family members who obviously are MAGA, and they still can see some humanity. But if it messes with their belief of what is happening in Israel, then the Palestinians and Hamas don't get grace, you know. And to me, Republicans who wipe out or discount or marginalize Black communities and say our history is irrelevant, what we've gone through isn't important, they're just as bad. But see, in their mind, if I say that, that's going to be an argument. No, Hamas is worse, and they're going to try to justify why Hamas is worse than that. And again, I have to quote Viktor Frankl in saying that when it comes to trauma, there is no king of trauma as far as who suffers more. If you truly a human, seeing anybody suffer should be enough, should be reason to oppose that particular action. And, I just want to add this before we take our break. That, you spoke of, again, Bernie Sanders and AOC speaking to large groups of people in rural America, mostly white people who are coming to hear their rallies because they're being impacted. I still think it comes down to this. Going back to Castillo's definition of stupid. And again, I'm not saying stupid from them being ignorant or their education level, but their willingness to support something. Stupid, by his definition, is a group of people who are willing to support something that is not only is going to benefit anybody else, it doesn't benefit them. And that's a stupid person. That's what he's defining as people who are stupid. And so those folks you're saying, yeah, it may be, and I think, in my opinion, I don't have any data, but again, I'm just going by the history of the country that I understand to be, and still seeing people who I know on social media who've been supporting Trump and been part of the MAGA rally from day one, and they still are a part of the MAGA rally, no matter what he's done, no matter how ICE is moving and snatching families away, they still don't see any, and they still support MAGA as though they're getting something from it, and they're not getting anything. And not only do I see white people who still stand with MAGA, I see Africans who are here who stand with MAGA, because I watch their posts on Facebook. I see Black folks who still support and identify with MAGA. They think that they believe in the cult, and they truly believe that what the speech and the lies that MAGA is out there saying. I mean, I was even told how they don't want to vote for Madani in New York because they think he's a socialist. And she even quoted me telling me, well, he wants to support putting, millions of dollars into transgender children operations. I'm like, did you see that on his platform? That's what I asked. Did you really see? Because she's going to show me an article as though that's true, because the article says it. But it's like, if he didn't say it, did you hear him say it? No, they didn't hear him say it. Just like the Republicans constantly keep saying that what the Democrats are fighting for is to make sure that illegal immigrants get access to medical care. And we know the Constitution, that's not even correct. But yet still they keep giving that false narrative, and their base repeats that. Then people will say, well, yeah, I just want to make sure. And again, it's not just their base. It's anybody who's stupid and who's not following along with critical thinking and just believing what they read because it fits a false narrative that they've been culturally given. So because it fits that narrative, then they choose to believe without examining it. And so for me, I don't have faith that people are going to just wake up and start voting, and even their own best interest, not becoming human enough to say, well, justice is wrong for anybody else. I don't believe they can put down their hate enough. Because again, I saw this interview with the documentarian, I can't believe that shows my age, the TBS documentarian that does all the things. Ken Burns. He spoke of when they came out with during the Reagan administration, they started putting out different policies, and their main focus was to take away rights from the majority of folks who wasn't white males, bottom line. And that was key. And they looked at how they maneuvered through that. They knew that certain people was going to push back, but they understood that others would go along with it because, again, as you said earlier, as you was closing thoughts, if you're not going to be impacted, so be it. As long as the other side loses. And some people can go even further. I want to give up my rights as long as you suffer for it. If you're suffering more, I will sacrifice some of my rights to watch you suffer because I hate you that much, because they've been told constantly that what the 1% is doing to them is not the problem. So it goes back to and I conclude my point on this, because I think this metaphor says it best, or this analogy says it best than the other. It's the person who makes $250 an hour telling the person who makes $50 an hour that their problem and the enemy is the person who makes $12 an hour.
Yeah.
So when you put it in that context, when are people going to wake up? I don't know. I guess I wish and I pray I'm wrong, but just based off what I continue to see, the conversations with people who still want to support MAGA, still trying to give him grace, still don't believe that Trump is an idiot and shouldn't be in office, even if he wasn't evil, but just his mental competence that he's shown that he's not able to be competent enough to be in a job. None of his cabinet members are, and you still give them grace, shows me that you're not ready for critical conversation.
Yeah. So interesting that this morning, the historian Timothy Snyder put out an 8-minute video. For those anybody who doesn't know Timothy Snyder, he's primarily a historian of Eastern and Central Europe. He is an expert on Ukraine, Soviet Union, Holocaust, and other things. But he put out an 8-minute video this morning. I'm actually going to share it with you, King. I'm just going to put it in the chat here. And he spoke about 5 similarities, not in terms of specific content, but in terms of the patterns of behavior of Stephen Miller and Joseph Stalin in terms of how they came into power. So again, he's really clear, and Snyder is brilliant, both in terms of his knowledge base, but in terms of his clarity of how he says things. So he points to 5 different things that are similar. I'm not going to try to go through those now, but I just want to point people to that. It's on Snyder's Substack, which is called Thinking About. And again, I just shared that link with you. I don't know if there's a way we can share that with folks who might see this. But it's only 8 minutes, and it's a chock full 8 minutes that shows the danger of Stephen Miller. And a big part of what he does is he puts out these vast, completely evidence-lacking conspiracy theories, says things about people and groups that are literally provably false, and he repeats them over and over again and wants to mobilize all of the federal government against these make-believe conspiracies, which are, far, in his language, they're far left woke conspiracies. And if you do any research, you can't find them. But there are enough people, to your point, who will just take Stephen Miller's frightening language, frankly, at face value and repeat it. So anyway, that's a quick plug for one of the guys that I learned from, Timothy Snyder's, again, 8-minute video this morning he dropped, showing the similarities of the pattern of Stalin and Miller's getting into positions of power. Both had to do with the gradual demise of their bosses. In Stalin's case, it was Lenin, who had 2 strokes. In Miller's case, it's Trump, who is obviously off and getting increasingly off now as a out of shape, not completely present 79-year-old, who can prep well for a scripted presentation. But even when he spoke to the generals and admirals last week, he went off script and sounded like a blathering idiot to the leaders of the United States military. That's not lost on people like Bondi, Miller, Hegseth, Vance, and others. But anyway, so I recommend giving Timothy Snyder 8 minutes when you can?
Well, I definitely will. And we have some technical challenges here, which prevents me from being able to play the video because the
Do you want me
internet
to try?
connection is not strong enough to play the video and still keep up.
Is it worth it? I mean, do you want to put it up? Because I could probably do it on my end if you want to take 8 minutes to do it, but it's up to you.
Well, I'll tell you what we do is we'll take our break from our sponsor, and then we'll try to
Good.
get it going. So let's take our break from our sponsor now, and then we'll come back on the other side and see if we can get the video going.
Yeah, sounds good.
The playbook for growing a local business online is simple. Capture new leads, conversationally convert those leads into sales, turn those customers into positive reviews, and then reactivate those customers into repeat buyers. And that's exactly what our platform does. In order to consistently generate new leads, you first need to be found. The quickest way to get search engines like Google to put your business at the top of search results is by having a steady flow of positive reviews. With our platform, you can show up in search and stand apart from your local competition by easily collecting new customer reviews through text. But getting found is only the beginning. Most consumers choose the first business that responds to them. So unless you start conversations with potential customers almost instantly, they'll go somewhere else. That's why we make starting conversations with website visitors as easy as clicking a button, connecting you instantly through text message so the conversation doesn't end when they leave your website. And we bring all your leads, no matter where they come from, into a single conversation stream that supports text, email, video messaging, Google Business Chats, and even Facebook and Instagram DMs, so you can respond faster and more efficiently than ever. When it comes to turning all those conversations into customers, we make collecting payments just another convenient part of the combo, so you get paid faster no matter how they prefer to pay. Next, you'll want to turn your new customers into happy reviews, which is a snap with our new review request quick actions. The more conversations and customers you generate, the easier it becomes to drive repeat business. We make reactivating contacts into customers as easy as, yup, you guessed it, the push of a button. With bulk actions, you can send out text and email campaigns to generate new sales whenever you have a new update, promotion, or story to tell. We make modern online marketing simple. Let's start growing your business today.
And we're back. Welcome to Healing America's Narratives. I'm your host, King, and this is my co-host, Reggie. So Reggie has loaded up the video. Let's see if we can play it now, since it'll be coming from your end. I'm going to add it to the stage.
Yeah.
And
so is it I'm ready to go?
Start.
I can just get it going now. So we'll
This is Timothy Snyder. It's the 8th of October, 2025. I'm speaking on my Substack, Thinking About, and my subject today is Stephen Miller and Stalinism. Now, this may not seem like the obvious way to approach the topic of Mr. Miller, but I would suggest that there are some uncanny resemblances between the careers of the two men. Let me just mention 5. Number 1, the positions that they occupy. Joseph Stalin was able to rise to power in the early Soviet Union because of his position as General Secretary of the Communist Party. That seems at first to be a kind of technical administrative position, but in allowing him to keep an eye on the entire apparatus and allowing him to take charge of promotions and demotions, it actually got him very close to the center of power. Similarly with Mr. Miller, he holds the position of Presidential Chief of Staff, which one might think is simply the top of a managerial pyramid, but it allows him precisely to decide who has the ear of the president. It seems to allow him to decide what the president, I was about to say reads, but I should say watches. It gives him an implicit authority, which I think is very quickly becoming an explicit authority over matters of state. in the US. Second similarity, illness to the principle. So Stalin's rise to power begins not with Lenin's death, but with Lenin's illness. Vladimir Lenin suffered 2 strokes in 1922 and then again in 1923, the second of them being quite debilitating. And it was during this period that Stalin begins his rise to power. I don't want to speculate too closely about the state of Mr. Trump's health, but it's obviously not ideal. And he is obviously in some sort of decline. And that decline seems, you can judge for yourself from the media as well as I, to have created a good deal of space for Mr. Miller to operate and to be seen to be operating at the center of power of the United States of America. A third similarity is, let's say, imaginative. It has to do with the ability to invent and then to insist on the existence of conspiracies that do not, in fact, exist. So Stalin's signal method of consolidating power was to take advantage of an assassination of a man called Kirov in 1934, and then to move from there to the claim that there were giant but unseen conspiracies inside the Soviet Union, linked to vast powers beyond the Soviet Union, whose only goal was to destroy Soviet power and, of course, make life difficult for Stalin himself. He proceeded on various versions of that plot to move through waves of great murderous terror in 1937 and 1938. All of them, whether they be show trials or whether they be much more silent but much larger mass killing operations, depending upon various non-existent plots. Now, of course, Mr. Miller isn't that far along yet, but in the last few days, he's shown a remarkably consistent propensity to insist on the existence of vast conspiracies inside the United States, linked, of course, to vast forces beyond the United States, with the goal of destroying American power or making life difficult for Mr. Miller himself. I'm going to note here that the convenience of vast non-existent conspiracies is that they allow for unlimited pursuit of the people that you decide are the enemy. Since the conspiracy does not, in fact, exist, you are essentially enabling yourself to do whatever you can, so long as you can keep the story going, which, of course, it's not clear that Mr. Miller can. The fourth similarity has to do with a fondness for the state of exception. So even the Soviet Union had laws. And in order to carry out moments of vast, coordinated, and rapid terror, even the Soviet Union had to suspend the rule of law for a formal state of exception. If we look at Mr. Miller's utterances in the last few days, we see a similar hankering for a state of exception. Again and again, in his wild critiques of judges and in the way he characterizes law, he is clamoring for precisely a moment of exception, where all things will be permitted, where only power matters, with only the executive having the personal ability to decide whether power or indeed terror is going to be used. A fifth similarity has to do with the direction in which this kind of conspiratorial thinking takes us and the direction in which this sort of unlimited power during a state of exception takes us. It has to do with interrogation. I'm not sure how many of you read with care the terror memo that Mr. Miller released last week, nominally Mr. Trump, but obviously Mr. Miller. One of its claims is that the federal government is going to use all the means at its disposal to interrogate suspects. This is important because when the conspiracy doesn't exist, and when you're in some kind of state of exception, it's the interrogations which allow you to generate the quote unquote evidence, which allows the whole thing to go on and continue. Now, I name these 5 similarities not because I'm claiming that the situation of the Soviet Union in, let's say, 1925 is exactly the same as the situation of the United States in 2025. What I am saying, and what I do try to say consistently, is that knowledge of history and awareness of history can allow us to see patterns, make connections, and identify incipient problems. It can give us a language and a set of references which allows us to step back, broaden our view, and see things, and sometimes warn ourselves and others when necessary. I'm not saying that substantially the views of the two men are the same, but I don't think it's the substance that is most important. I actually think it's the form. I think a form in which you rise to power unelected by controlling access to the leader, a form in which you are taking advantage of the illness of that leader, a form in which you rely upon non-existent vast conspiracies, a form in which you plead for and try to implement a state of exception, and a form of politics in which you dream about and eventually carry out vast numbers of interrogations in order to, so to speak, make real that conspiracy. That form of politics is something that we should be alert to. So I'm making this comparison not because I think the political aims are the same. Obviously, they're not. But I'm making this comparison because, to me, what's fundamental is the political form, the political method. And I see forms and methods here which are concerning. And the comparison to the Soviet Union in the 1920s is one way to see why we have cause for concern. Thank you for listening. This is Tim Snyder. This is for the 8th of October, 2025. It's on my Substack, Thinking About. Thanks for being with me.
Yeah, that was.
Well, yeah, go ahead and do a post.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, King.
No, I was saying go ahead and do your post assessment of.
I think the this idea of civic ignorance again. I mean, listening to someone like Snyder, who is obviously an articulate and well-informed and wonderfully articulate presenter. Like just to concise, in 8 minutes, he gave us those 5 points of comparison, was really clear about what he wasn't saying as well as what he was saying. And that the form or the patterns of what Miller is doing, even though the content isn't identical to what Stalin did so far, are cause for concern. And that's the type of, for me, learning, I mean, looking to historians, long-form journalists, and others who don't have an axe to grind, but are pointing to these larger patterns and movements historically to help us better understand the current moment. So that's what I wanted to say about that. I find that Snyder is a wonderful guy to shine light on shadow because of his background.
Well, I think what you shared is definitely, informative. It's frightening, but it also goes to show the point of why, as I stated earlier, that Trump's administration wants to rule out or disallow or remove or change history in America from what America has done to now Black people, but I'm sure they will continue to do it against anybody else as well. Because when you don't know history, then history can repeat itself. When you know history and you can see the warning signs, then you can say, okay, well, I see this coming, as he just laid out, comparing Stephen Miller to the rise of Stalin. So that to me is what I get from that. It's like we're right here, we're at the precipice. And for those who are critically thinking, who are aware, we see it. And unfortunately, we make up the smallest majority. I mean, we make up the smallest percentage of the country because most people are just going to read and their social media feeds, listen to people who are their influencers for their podcast, for information, and then quote that as its facts. Like I laid out earlier with the people who I'm actually engaging with here, who, if we don't talk politics, you would think we're completely aligned about everything. But then when politics comes up in any way, shape, form, or fashion, I see where, again, it fits their agenda, it fits their narrative to believe alternative facts or lies, to really put it straightforward. They believe lies because it fits their agenda. But we've reached the point of the show where we want to begin to start wrapping things up and giving people some clear guidance as far as what direction they should be moving in for those who want to navigate these waters, heal America's narratives, and to become more fully human. So why don't you give us some guidance on that as we begin to wrap up our show?
Yeah, so it's a big ask considering what we just shared. But the question that comes up for me is actually two questions in one to reflect on is, what is it that I truly want to see in the world? And for whom do I want it? So what is it that I truly want to see in the world? And for whom do I want it? So if what you really want to see in the world is, that you make $1 billion and you only want it for yourself, and I don't typically use the language I'm about to say, but if that's the case, I want to make $1 billion and I only want it about myself, I don't care about anybody else. Well, you're part of the problem. You're part of what's has led to the wealth inequality globally now, not just in the U.S., that we currently face. But what do I really want? In the deepest part of here's another way to add, to ask it. In the deepest part of my soul, in the deepest part of my heart, what is it do I truly want, and for whom do I want it? And just ask that question, see what comes up. Not up here. You can use your brain, but really get down into your heart and into your belly, and ask it from the kind of the basic part of yourself, the part that existed before you were given all the stories that you were given since you were a child. Who do you want the good things for? And then act accordingly. Behave in a way that's consistent with that. Again, if you want to hurt people, I don't have much to say to you other than please stop.
Absolutely. Well, now we want to shift into the last part of our meeting, or our show, I'm sorry, where we really begin to break down the key examples of people we feel who are fully human, who've shown those characteristics either throughout history or currently showing those behavior characteristics, currently. We want to give them flowers, we want to lift them up, because we want to show that what we're talking about is just not some unrealistic, unattainable goal, but people who actually have lived fully human and are living fully human lifestyles. And we advocate that you should do the same. So with that being said, I'm going to lift up someone who I'm currently experiencing this love and this grace now. It's a gentleman by the name of Mike Murphy. And just briefly, Mike Murphy is a gentleman who's an author, successful businessman. He's authored three books. He's a self-made millionaire, and he's been on shows like Larry King and other shows talking about his book called The Creation Frequency. He talks about how everything is energy and you can manifest things by tapping into this creative frequency. Now, this book changed my life because I read this book right after I went through my challenge in Baltimore City. And that's what helped change my mind and really change my identity. So I was really lost. When you lose your identity, you really definitely lose your purpose, and you definitely lose your way, but you lose how you want to pursue life. And for me, this book brought me back and helped me tap back into the creative energy. So long story short, he opened a retreat after living his practices and principles and walking the walk and man integrity. He used his creation frequency to come to Colombia, South America, and buy a 40-acre piece of property and turn it into a holistic retreat called Mountains of Hope, where I am right now. And it's a transformational place. It's full of love, energy. You eat organic foods. It's all those things. But I lift Mike up right now just quickly because I want to, again, talk about him being fully human. And as you know, I evaluate that based on 6 core principles. So I want to just recite those quickly to just say, this is how Mike manifests this. So identity, Mike's journey from rags to riches. There's a strong sense of self. Doesn't see himself, as I said earlier, as someone who is white. He sees himself as a full human being, and he's a grateful spirit, and he believes he's a servant to others. His growth mindset has demonstrated his tenacity of becoming multiple at rest on his own things and diversity, and just really becoming a culture of this place I am right now, where I've met wonderful people from all the world who comes here and get healed. His higher purpose in serving, his was in love with a woman named Margot, and she died from cancer, and that inspired him to build this place, put millions of dollars into it. It's a luxury oasis, but it's here for people to heal from serious illness as well as mental and spiritual, and that love and that higher purpose created that desire for him to do it. His core principles are anchored and his values are all over this business. The people here serve with intent, and they give, and they tied into that. He has a grateful spirit, which is the fifth principle. He manifests gratitude, and I felt an immense more gratitude I've ever felt in my life by being here so much. I've extended my trip so much so. And then finally, his self-awareness. He understands that he's in another country and he's creating jobs. He's created over 35 jobs, people who work here, and he brings people from all around the world to heal. It's really just a magical place. And so that's why I want to lift up Mike Murphy, because of other people who really believe in things like the creation frequency and the law of attraction and the energy manifesting and being successful in business, that they were also willing to take that same belief and make it manifest their higher purpose passion for serving others like he's done. I believe the world would be a much greater place. So I want to lift up Mike Murphy right now.
Yeah, beautiful. Thanks for that. I have to reflect as even though it took me the better part of an hour to notice this, the impact is palpable as I look at you, because this is the first time you're wearing a hat that doesn't say King on it. It says Mountain of Hope. Sorry, I just noticed that now. So it took me the whole hour to actually see that you had a different hat on. So apologies for that. But
No problem.
yeah, I'm gonna note a guy that I've noted before, arguably the most essential inspirational figure in my life whom I didn't know personally back when I was 16. This past September 28th, just over a week ago, marked the first anniversary of his death. And that's Chris Christopherson, who, beyond his background or maybe because of his background as an award-winning fiction writer in college, a football player, a rugby player, a Rhodes Scholar, a U.S. Army Ranger, and helicopter pilot. He rose up to the rank of captain in the U.S. Army. He volunteered for Vietnam, but was not sent because they wanted him to teach at West Point, which he refused to do. Got out of the Army, went down to Nashville, worked as a custodian for 5 years, trying to peddle his songs. And eventually, people began to record his songs. And because he was intelligent, articulate, and good-looking, he also was invited to enter in the movie industry, where he starred in a variety of films over some 50 years. So again, we lost Christopherson on September 28th, 2024. When I was a kid, when I was 16 years old, his story gave me what I like to call a capital P sense of possibility, because my upbringing, which was wonderful and loving, was basically, you do a good job in school, you go to college, you get a job, you meet somebody, you get married, you bring kids into the world, you work, you retire, and live happily ever after. And it never occurred that you could take some risks beyond the path that was expected of you. And he did all the things his parents wanted him to do until he was about 28 or 29. And he realized that the military career and the West Point gig wasn't what he wanted. So he walked away from it and then moved into his true soul's work for the rest of his life and was immensely successful. So it took me a few years to realize I wasn't supposed to be like him. I had to just learn who I was and be more like myself. So that was a lesson I got from the late Chris Christopherson.
Well, you mentioned him and brought him up before.
Yeah.
And I mentioned that because until you had done that and given him his flowers, I had only known Chris Christopherson as a movie actor.
Yeah.
I remember him in that movie with the truck.
Convoy,
right? That was the first movie I saw of him and my first exposure to him. And I've seen him in a few other movies since then. So to me, he was just an actor.
Yeah.
So that's the importance of us lifting up our individuals, because without that, being you and I are not completely different generations, but you may have a decade older than me, that it just shows how society and media treats people. So by the time my generation started getting access to Chris Christopherson, I see him as an actor, and didn't recognize his body of work. So thank you for lifting him up. I think that's a great choice.
Yeah. You're welcome.
And so with that, we're going to conclude our episode of Healing America's Narratives. Again, I want to thank Reggie for being present, for being here. I want to thank our technology for, not working perfectly, but it was still able to get us to a show, even considering I'm, miles away, hundreds of miles away in another country, but we were still able to do the show, which shows we were meant to do that. So until next Wednesday, everyone, let's continue to heal America's narratives. We're going to continue our show next Wednesday, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So until next Wednesday, thank you.